Welcome back, everybody, to SmarterUmedia, where we guarantee to make you smarter in 2 minutes. But we're going to be so much fun, you're going to want to stick around for a lot longer. We are super honored today to have a friend of the show and friend of the Alderston Griffin Center. Dr. Don Klemper is the department chair of the area of management at Rawls College of Business and many exciting titles here at Texas Tech and beyond. Don, welcome to Smarter You.
Nice to be here.
Well, you know how we do this. We don't make our audience wait through a whole bunch of talk or anything. We're promised to make them smarter, so we're going to get straight to that. You've come with something that you've found over the years of working in lots of arenas, but you are particularly an expert of personality in the workplace. And dear Lord, if you've ever worked in a workplace, it's all about the personalities every day, every time, all the time. So there's plenty to talk about today. What I'm going to do is grab our chicken timer. We always want to make sure everybody can see the chicken timer because it's so doggone cute. I'm going to add 2 minutes to it so you can hear right here. That's one. That's two. And without further ado, Don, make us smarter.
All right. So my primary area of research is personality and organization. So why do people behave the way they do in the workplace? So I guess just first, the overview of what personality is. So these are the enduring characteristics that a person has that motivates them to behave in certain ways. So in the academic realm, there are different personality frameworks that are used, and so the dominant personality framework that's used in academia is the Big Five model of personality. There are other frameworks as well, like the Dark Triad, proactive personality, grit, other kinds of constructs. But one that's found the most usefulness is the Big Five, and that consists of openness to experience. So, for example, somebody that's more open to experience would be more likely to do well, let's say, as an expat, because they're exposed to a lot of different things in their environment. The next trait in the Big Five is conscientiousness. So this would essentially be people that would be more hardworking, dutiful, organized, that type of thing. And there really is no job that being higher in conscientiousness doesn't really help you to be able to perform. The third Big Five trait is extroversion. So these people that are highly extroverted get energy and are energized by socially interacting with others. So those types of individuals would be, let's say, better at sales jobs. The fourth characteristic is agreeableness. So these people obviously are agreeable. They're much better at roles like customer service, where they really need to get along with others. And then the last characteristic in the Big Five is neuroticism or emotional stability. And these individuals are going to perform much better in low stress kinds of jobs.
Look at that. You got through all five. That's wildly exciting. If you were to sum up the thing that makes us smarter, you've gone and spent a lot of time researching how we are and who we are. Those five types, again, there are five types of personalities that we can probably recognize in the workplace. So let's name them again. Let's go back to so we can help identify before we go off and let people get into their world. So what are the five again?
Yeah, so a good way to remember is an acronym OCEAN. OCEAN. So that's
Okay.
openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. OCEAN.
Well, that's terrific. Now, we know everybody's busy. Life's busy. We know you may not want to stick around, but if that isn't a little bit of a seed that you want to grow into an oak, I can't imagine, because we're going to sit and talk now about the experiences that we have every day. So off if you need to go, but stick around if you dare to stick around, because we have the true expert on those things that frustrate us all the time, or that we don't understand why it was a great day today, why it wasn't a great day yesterday. I feel like that's so practical for us in every workplace. I'm going to ask you the question behind the question first, which is, as somebody who does research where that's the abstract, but also runs a department at a business school in a successful college, Texas Tech in Texas, how does the rubber meet the road? So you as a researcher, when you're reading about the case studies and how people work, how does that transform into your own personal experience? Is it helpful, or sometimes you just throw your hands up and go, people are people?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on there, right? But I mean, I think the first aspect of understanding personality is really understanding yourself and what kind of motivations and drives that you have, because that's going to impact how you're interfacing with everybody else in the workplace and beyond the workplace. But then when you moving into a leadership role, put the leadership hat on, now not only are you wanting to understand yourself and what you bring to the table, but also every other individual on your team. And so now we're talking about broader team dynamics. And when you, let's say, hire someone or promote someone or identify someone for a particular task, um, you need to account for a factor in personality. So, for example, somebody that is extroverted might be better at certain kind of tasks that would involve like social interaction. Accounting for those team dynamics makes this very much more complex, in that now we have dynamics of the introvert and the extrovert interacting with each other, and what's that dynamic going to look like that's very different than two extroverts dealing with each other or two introverts dealing with each other.
Well, and that's all external. So, how are we? What kind of personality types are we? I'm a total extrovert, right? So I'm the person who gets charged by being around people, by being big and in a room, and that's probably why we're on a podcast and I've got headphones on, right? So I would say I'm that, and then probably an array of all of the others mixed in. It doesn't feel like it's just one or the other. How about you? Where do you feel like you fit into the five personalities?
Yeah, the interesting thing. So each one of these is on a continuum. And the reason that you're identifying extroversion is because you're very high, sort of extreme on extroversion. But everybody in the world has some level of each of the five of them, that creates a very unique combination for that individual. And it really makes them different from everybody else on the planet.
Sure. Exactly right. So you completely avoided the personal question. Where do you, one of the five? Come on, come on. Let's reveal. That's what we are. We're here to let ourselves out. Let's give it a break. What do you think, Dom? Where do you fit
Yeah.
in the five? What's the dominant piece of your management style?
Yeah. So I mean, my mix would be relatively open. I'm at least self-described as highly conscientious. I'm more on the introverted side, so it takes me a little bit more energy to manifest extroversion. I need a little bit more time to sort of recover from that with some personal time after. Relatively agreeable, but leaders can't always don't can't be agreeable all the time. So there's certain situations where you deal with conflict where you can't be. So relatively balanced on agreeableness. And then again, with my self view, at least of my neuroticism, is that I would be low, and that I have a high ability to deal with stressful situations, and that one is tied to resilience in some ways.
I think all of that makes perfect sense. Having worked together for a year, I think that's the way that goes. Well, how do you apply these things? So as I'm going into the workplace in the morning, and most often we think about personalities in the workplace. Unfortunately, when it's a negative thing, but probably the positive too. We'll start with that. It's sort of been there's something going on, there's something brewing, and I just need tools. I need something that I can get into my tool chest, come to work tomorrow, and find a way to address it differently. Where do I start? Do I start with trying to identify the personalities that are there and then find a way to apply some sort of effort that I can make to change how I view it or how they may view me? What do I do?
Uh, well, like I said earlier, starting with like trying to get an assessment of sort of where you stand on these characteristics. But one sort of complexity of this, so the old school view of personality was that these are very immutable characteristics, and like if you're extroverted, highly extroverted, that you're always highly extroverted, because personality has a grounding in DNA and genetics, which don't change. But newer literature is showing that personality actually does change in an enduring way, or even on a daily level, so that you could be perhaps more extroverted or introverted on a given day, which makes this dynamic even more challenging.
Yeah, and is that, I mean, that could be great in some ways, because I feel like if we, I mean, all of the research on neuroplasticity now, which is changing how we view so many things, that instead of sort of thinking, oh, I'm stuck, this is what I am, and I can never change it. We are believing more and more that we have the ability to change, and our environments have a huge impact. The book Revenge of the Tipping Point, I just read, by Malcolm Gladwell, there's an old adage, show me who your friends are, I'll show you who you'll be, right? And he extends that essentially by saying, go and move into places with the people that are like what you'd like to be, because no matter what you try to be, you're going to become like the people around you. And so that's sort of a double-edged sword. So the thing you're talking about, I think, is hugely impactful, to recognize, hey, today I don't have to be what I was yesterday. I can be a little different. I can walk in different to the office today. And at the same time, find environments. If you're not happy where you are and you have the ability, we don't all have the ability, but if you have the ability to change where you are and be in a place that serves who you want to be better, do it.
Yeah, and so I've got a theory paper that I wrote that sort of explains how personality changes, but also identifies things that individuals, leaders, and organizations can do actually to facilitate that personality change in positive ways, right? So there are things that you can do if you understand your personality, and how that's going to perhaps enhance or limit you, and then you can make adjustments based on your understanding. But leaders can do similar kinds of things, and how they might choose to arrange who to put on a team, but how they might develop the individual employees. And then organizations have a responsibility for setting an organizational culture that really helps to facilitate and get the most out of these different personality team dynamics.
Specifics, like what? What are, I mean, I love this paper. It sounds like something I'm going to have to read.
Yeah, so from an individual level, so you can focus on, say, learned optimism. So that's going to put you in a more positive frame of mind, and that's gonna enhance some of the positive aspects of those personality traits. Um, so organizations, so there can be fitness or engagement types of activities that are done. So you could have, so some, for example, organizations will have the factory workers do calisthenics in the morning. Well, that's going to have an impact on their physiology for the day. Not only does it physically sort of refresh them, but it's going to put them in a certain mental frame, and it's going to affect their personality. So one of the things that we're finding from the literature is that stressful environments actually change your personality through those physiological systems. So, stress is one thing that you have to keep in mind, and that is going to change essentially a lot of those personality characteristics. So, if organizations, leaders, and individuals can manage their stress, then they can manage their personality change in positive ways too.
It's been amazing to watch in our lifetime how differently we look at stress, right? How it's just not it's not what it used to be, where it was sort of, hey, buck up, deal with it, or whatever. It's sort of, we'll all be better if we can manage that part of our life, which I really love. Then behind all of our lives, we have this weird duality, which is we have what we think of as our work life, and that's the area that you spend a lot of time studying, personality doesn't end when you walk out of the office and head home. I feel like the dynamic between the two is one of those that is as hard as anything to negotiate in life. It's not taking the thing that happened at work home or the stuff that's happening in your life. There's no way it's not all combined. Um, how do you how do you take those things and the sort of the literature, the things that you've worked to try to understand and apply them? Because I'm sure they do. They apply at home too.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the traditional view of personality is that it's very global, and you have a personality that sort of affects all spheres and aspects of your life. But there's a lot of emerging literature that says basically you're going to act different in different spheres of life that you have, right? So for example, I mentioned that I at least self-describe myself as being highly conscientious in what I might do in my leadership role, but my wife might tell you that it's hard for her to get me to take out the trash. So I might be conscientious at
At
work,
work,
but
right?
not conscientious
Yes.
at
Oh,
home.
of course. Oh my gosh. When you say it, it seems so obvious, right? It seems, well, of course. And I would even say that we tend to have there's this phenomenon that I have noticed for a long time, which sort of is even with different groups that you associate with, you're a little bit different. I mean, I used to teach and I speak French. The French Steve is a very different dude. I mean, not a totally different guy, but different. That's for sure. And same sort of thing that what you're saying probably happens more than I might think.
And some of it happens naturally, and some of it there are impression management processes where if we understand our personality, if I understand that I'm more introverted than I am extroverted, then I need to summon energy. So me understanding my personality allows me to make adjustments, and that's why like when I teach or in certain kinds of environments, I can portray myself as being more extroverted, right? So some of this is overlaid with impression management and the fact that I might want other people to see me in a different light in the workplace, and that's different than I would want people to see me in a social setting or with my family or those types of things. So that is going to be one of the drivers of those sort of different behaviors.
And know thyself. If I were to sum up what you have come to Smarter You Media with, it is if you can know yourself, you have a chance to make it make more sense, make it easier, make the process work better. All of it, right?
Absolutely. The fundamental building block is know yourself and your personality, and you have to be able to do that because the second building block then as a leader is you not only have to understand yourself and how that's going to change how you're interacting with everybody else, but you need to assess their personalities so that you can utilize and deploy them in the right ways.
And now we're in the third rail of friendship. We just got there. Here we just got there. First of all, you can assess their person, but now let's get to the thing that I think is somewhat verboten. You can assess it yourself, but you probably shouldn't be telling someone else they're an introvert.
Yeah, and this is complicated. When I was giving my self-assessment, I tried to be careful with the language. That's my self-view of my personality. If you were to ask other individuals, like, for example, my wife about conscientiousness, you might get a different perception. And all of the different individuals, myself, my wife, my boss, my subordinates, and the workplace, there's going to be a different aspect of bias in them sort of trying to get an accurate assessment of that. And if we could triangulate those biases, and if we can put together self views and other people's views, we actually get a much more accurate assessment of someone's personality.
Yes, the uncomfortable question that I'm asking, I'm going to ask it again because I love the uncomfortable question every time. But it is so I have found when sort of assessing roles and people, friends or colleagues or anyone, it is something that's useful to me if I can try to triangulate or find any way that to understand them better because understanding thyself, understanding other personalities, critically important. But it doesn't seem to be always a great idea, sort of, to label someone else because out loud, because oftentimes better for them to have their own assessment, even if it's wrong. I mean, how do you deal with that? So if there's someone who thinks that they're very conscientious, you watch them every day sitting, in the office and they're anything but. What do you do with that?
Well, so again, each of these sources is going to have bias, right? So I could have an overly inflated view. So perhaps my perception of my conscientiousness is really higher than it really is, right? Now that's a problem. And if somebody's giving me feedback that I'm really not conscientious, if I'm less conscientious than I think I am, then that's going to cause some issues. But it might be the other individuals that have a more accurate assessment of my personality, right? So, and other individuals, there's going to be different kinds of biases. Like family members would have something called inclusive fitness. So because your parents, the, they want you to succeed, they're going to have a positive skew. So they might be just overly positive as you might be, but your coworkers, who are also your friends, they get to see how you behave in a lot of different aspects. They might actually have a more accurate view than either like a parent or yourself.
Yes. And I still want to ask the uncomfortable question, which is, so essentially I'm asking, is it one of those things that is somewhat that is a bad idea? So as you think, not just from the research, but also from your life experience, because you have had very important roles in important institutions. So is it one of those things that you just always avoid, or how would you go about making a workplace better by having people do their own either self-assessment or assessment? I mean, how do you do that without it being, I don't know, it's something that blows up or is toxic?
Yeah, well, so I mean, people are going to have inflated views, and those become blind spots, right? The bias is an inaccuracy, and if I believe that I'm more conscientious than I am, then that really is a problem. I really should have a more accurate view, right? So if I don't really know myself, I think I know myself, but I don't really know myself, then I'm not going to be able to sort of use that information in the best way possible. So those other individuals might have a more accurate assessment, and I think it's important for individuals to understand that they are likely going to be biased and biased in a with a positive skew. So I'm talking about conscientiousness more so because it's a personality trait that has a clear side that's favorable, right? Nobody wants to be not conscientious, right? Whereas introverts and extroverts,
Right.
there's not really a side that's better or worse depending on the situation that you're in. So I think it comes down to trying to be accurate and really understand. It might it might not help your ego to learn that you're not as conscientious as you thought you were, but it helps your accuracy and it helps you to engage with the world in a much better way. So I think the understanding who you are doesn't just come from you. To accurately understand who you are, you should be getting the perspectives from other individuals. So the fable of the elephant. So I may in my own self view sort of have an understanding like it's the trunk, right? But somebody else sees the ears, and somebody else sees the tail, and somebody else sees the legs, and that gives a more complete picture. And if I really get all of that data and really get a better understanding of who I truly am and adjust my self view accordingly, then I'm going to be able to interface with the world in a much more appropriate ways.
So I hear and that you suggest if I'm running a small, medium, large, whatever it is the enterprise is that I'm running, or in my life generally, I would be served not just by my own self-assessment, but by orchestrating and finding ways that we can all self-assess ourselves well, because that will make it healthier for all of us.
Yes, yes. So in organizations, it's very popular for personality testing to be done for hiring. right? So I talk about conscientiousness quite a bit. There's no job that's really better to be lower in that, right? So that's something that's used for hiring quite a bit, but it's also used for training and development and to identify who should be on a particular team and, adjusting roles and responsibilities.
One of the things that I've often expressed to my kids and people around me is that I feel like we all wake up every day the star of our own movie, because we don't have, this is what we have, right? This is what we have. We have our perception, we have who we are, we go through every day, we do that. And oftentimes, understanding that has been incredibly helpful to me when I don't understand someone's position. When I think, how could you think, and you fill in the blank, which I think in the world right now, we have a lot of that going on. It helps me to understand uh, that generally people are not taking a position that they think is wrong or doing something that they think is wrong, or you wouldn't do it. So no matter what the context is, people tend to have a self-enforcement mechanism just contained in how it is to be human.
Yeah, individuals want to protect their own egos, right? Yeah, it's hard to get feedback sometimes, especially with something like personality, that is something that is challenging, though not impossible to change.
That has been an awful lot of interesting stuff for me to process. I think it's going to take a while to sit with that sort of personally to find the ways to go forward. So I know that we end by trying to make us not just someone who gets a fish, but learns how to fish. So I know you've come with some sort of uh, information source. So something that you found in an area or some area that is useful and helpful. Before we do that, we're going to get to that in just a second. But for the things we've just been talking about, if it's not your source, is there someplace you would suggest people go to find a simple explanation of these five personality pieces that they can then learn more about and do their own self-assessment in a more depth, in a deeper way?
Yeah, so we're talking really now about measurement. So how would you measure? Again, there's different personality frameworks, and there's different measures of those frameworks. So there's an article that came out a few years ago that's from Pathke, and I'm a co-author on the paper that creates a measure that's actually a work frame of reference measure of the big five personality traits. So it's looking at that workplace frame because that workplace frame has more salience, more relevance for workplace outcomes like job performance and those types of things. And that measure can be used for self-assessment purposes, and it can be used to be rated by others. And so you can triangulate. So an organization or an individual could take that measure, do a self-assessment or do a self and a peer assessment, and get a very accurate understanding of how every employee, where they fit on each of those five characteristics. So yeah, the accuracy of measurement and identifying a good measure to be able to use and incorporate in an organization, either for deciding who you're going to hire or just to have a really good understanding of those characteristics so that leaders and individuals can make adjustments based on the information they have about the different motivations that people have when they have different personality traits.
That's awesome. All right, so let's end with a actual resource, something that lets us curate information better. We are true believers that in the land of information today, it's hard to curate well information and find reliable sources. So, what's something you found along the way that is really helpful and you use and rely on?
Well, I mean, there's a volume of literature, right? So we're talking about academic studies that are done, or meta-analyses that are done that accumulate all of the research findings and pull them all together with more statistical power, right? So I do think there are some good There's some good research out there that describes like what personality is and how personality changes. There's good resources out there for personality measures. And there's good resources out there for accumulating all of the data in organizations of which personality traits are going to lead to different kinds of behaviors like workplace performance or deviance or helping behaviors or leadership or any number of things in organizations.
Is there any one particular? So do you have a actual place that I could go, a site or something like that that you go to specifically, and I can use as a
Yeah,
resource?
sure. So the if you want to understand about how personality changes, the physiology, um, then there's a paper called An Explanation of Personality Change in Organizational Science, Personality as an Outcome of Workplace Stress. That's authored by Jarvis Smallfield and Don Klemper in the Journal of Management in 2022.
That's fantastic, and we will try to drop it in the chat below, or it's a place that you'll be able to find it while you come. Dr. Don Klemper, thank you for joining us today on Smarter You. I do feel smarter. I suppose that's a good thing. And with that, we'll see you soon. Everybody come back. We'll see you again.
Thanks for having me, Steve.